They called it Combat Outpost Sabre, but there was nothing sharp about it. Just a scatter of concrete walls, rust-colored sandbags, and prefab shacks clinging to the side of a mountain in Kunar province, like a stubborn thought that refused to fade. High in the Hindu Kush, beyond the reach of easy supply routes or satellite comfort, Sabre felt like the edge of something. Not the edge of the world exactly, but the edge of knowing, a place where sound died strange. And on November 18th, 2008, sometime past 0200, the sound died completely. No hum of the generator, no distant mortar practice from the Anna, no boots crunching gravel, just cold black silence. The kind that presses against the lungs. Staff Sergeant Eli Mercer sat alone in the comms room, a space not much bigger than a walk-in closet, buried halfway into the slope behind HESCO barriers. His only light came from the dull red glow of the emergency backup lamp above the desk, and the pale green flicker of the radio's LCD screen, static whispered through the headset, a dry, meaningless hiss that usually brought him comfort. But tonight, something about it felt too quiet. He leaned in, adjusted the frequency dial slowly, deliberately, nothing static, then a voice, then barely audible, just a flicker in the white noise. Echo 6 Lima 20. Eli froze. His fingers hovered over the gain control, heart thudding in his ears. The voice repeated, more strained this time. Echo 6 Lima 20, grid 41 Sierra. He knew that call sign. His stomach turned to gravel. Reese, Captain Jamie Reese, Delta Squad leader, went missing on recon 12 days ago. A narrow valley south of the Korangal. 4 men under his command. No bodies recovered, just a destroyed Humvee. A blood trail that vanished into pine needles. And the kind of silence that doesn't break. Everyone else had stopped listening. Eli hadn't. He reached for the logbook, flipped it open with shaking hands and scribbled the coordinates. His breath fogged the glass of the headset. He adjusted again, sharper, closer, filtering the gain to cut the static. A low hum pulsed underneath the signal now, like the sound of distant rotors or blood in the ears. Then, clear as if whispered in the same room, "Do not forget us," and gone. Dead air. He sat there for a long time, hand still clutching the pen, heart pounding. The silence after that voice felt heavier than any blast he'd heard in country. He blinked, looked at the screen, checked the channel. 34,425 emerged, same one Reese used to check in. Protocol said it had been cleared. Command said they were lost. Official, done. But the mountain had other plans. He took off the headset slowly, looked around the dark room. The walls lined with peeling paper, wires like veins crawling up into the ceiling. A coffee mug, crusted and chipped, sat untouched by the edge of the desk. The air smelled like burnt plastic and wet wool. He stood, opened the narrow window slit, looked out into the dark. The valley below was just a suggestion, moonlit and ghost-colored. Nothing moved, not the wind, not a light, not even the stars. Just that kind of empty where you don't see the dead, but you feel them. He remembered something Jamie once said just before they deployed. You ever think ghosts don't haunt places? They haunt people. Eli had laughed at the time, not anymore. The radio crackled once, a faint blip, then nothing. He closed the window, sat back down. No one would believe him. Maybe even he didn't believe him, but the voice was real. He knew that cadence, that rasp, that clipped edge Jamie had after too many cigarettes and not enough sleep. You don't forget the voice of a man who once dragged you out of a flipped Marap under fire. And maybe that was the problem. He clicked the recorder on, just in case. This is Cop Sabre, Sergeant Mercer. He spoke into the mic, low and steady. Repeat your last transmission. Do you copy? Silence. This is Cop Sabre. Over. He waited. 30 seconds, a minute, 2, nothing, still dead air. He logged it anyway. Time, frequency, content, typed it into the daily report, but buried it deep, under weather conditions and routine checks. No point raising flags yet. They'd say it was echo, interference, some Russian garbage bouncing off the ionosphere, anything but what it really sounded like. A man who refused to be forgotten at 300, the generator sputtered back on. Lights buzzed to life overhead, sterile and sudden. He flinched against the brightness, blinking. Down the hill, someone shouted half-awake orders. A door slammed. Cop Saber stirred again. War never slept for long, but Eli stayed in the chair. Headset still around his neck, eyes on the dial. He'd spent 7 years in uniform, 3 tours, seen fire bases in Helmand, checkpoints in Kandahar, patrols that bled into days without names. He'd lost men to snipers, AIDS, infection, even one to his own hand, but never like this, never to silence. Because that's what haunted him most. Not the blood, not the burning, but the vanishing, when a man just disappeared like he never existed. That's a second death, a deeper one, and tonight, someone out there was fighting it. The next morning, the sun didn't rise so much as it bled over the peaks. Washing the valley in ash and rust from the top of Cop Saber, it looked almost peaceful, almost. Eli sat with a mug of burnt coffee and a bandage on his left thumb, the result of cutting a new spool of antenna wire before the sun came up. Sleep hadn't come, not after what he heard, not with Jamie's voice still echoing in his head like it had pulled up a chair and refused to leave. Nobody else knew. The squad came and went. Corporal Haynes fiddled with the busted SATCOM terminal again. Sergeant Reyes cursed the new boots who couldn't clean a weapon right. The mess tent ran out of eggs. All of it normal, all of it noise. But Eli was listening for something deeper when Captain Stokes made his rounds that morning. Clipboard in hand, Eli flagged him. "Sir, I need a minute." The captain glanced up, tired eyes behind dust-scratched glasses. "Make it 30 seconds. Eli leaned in, quiet. "I picked up a voice last night. Reese's call sign, Echo 6 Lima." Stokes didn't even blink. "Wrong. That squad's Mia. Presumed Kia." "I know that, sir, but I got coordinates. A full grid reference. It was clear." Stokes sighed. "Look, I've been out here too long to entertain campfire ghosts. Could have been bounce, radio reflection. We get Russian chatter bleeding into our bands all the time. This wasn't Russian." "Mercer," the captain lowered the clipboard. "I know you were close to Reese, and I get it. I do, but you're hearing what you want to hear. That's not mission focus." "I recorded it." Stokes stared for a beat, jaw clenched. "You put it in the report." "No, sir." "Good. Let it go." He turned and walked away, but Eli didn't let it go that night. After lights out and after the generator hiccuped back into silence, Eli slipped back into the comms room and locked the door. He pulled out the recorder, rewound the tape, played it back. Echo 6, Lima, 20, grid, 41, Sierra. His own breathing felt louder than the voice on tape. He copied the coordinates onto a map. A valley just north of the last known position. Higher elevation, more pine, almost no satellite coverage, no confirmed Taliban presence either. But they said that about Korangal before it turned into a meat grinder. He stared at the topography for hours, drawn to the empty spaces, the places unmapped, the white spots where sound disappeared and time frayed. He began cross-referencing old patrol logs, pulling files from a laptop barely functioning under dust and age. 12 days ago, Reese's unit was doing recon on a possible weapons route used by local fighters. They reported movement near an abandoned shepherd's hut, then nothing, except now. This, on the 3rd night. The voice came again. "We need extraction. Supplies low. 2 casualties, not dead yet." It was Reese, no doubt, but the way he spoke, it wasn't like a man trapped in time. It was slower, stranger, as if the mountains had changed his tongue, or the static had smoothed it over. The pauses were unnatural, like someone trying to remember what being human sounded like. And this time, there was a second voice, faint, breathy, a name, Eli. He nearly dropped the mic. He called out, "Jamie, say again, over." But the line cut, dead air again. The hair on his arms stood on end. That voice, it was like hearing someone speak from underwater, under dirt, under memory, like a dream you forgot, until someone said the name out loud and it pulled your heart sideways. He didn't sleep that night. He didn't sleep the next either. A week passed. Eli stopped eating with the others, stopped writing home. The voices didn't return every night, only when it was quietest, coldest when the generator stuttered. When the wind died, he started to notice patterns, times, moon phases, frequencies. He kept a second logbook now, hidden under his cot, filled with scribbled transmissions, timestamps, and cross-checked grid references. It wasn't madness, it was math, a signal, a message. He could feel the logic in the chaos, but no one else wanted to hear it. Haynes called him the priest of dead wires. Reyes told a medic he was headed for a Section 8. Some of the new guys started knocking on his door at night, joking about ghosts in the wires. But when Eli didn't laugh, they stopped knocking. He was alone now, just like the voices, and maybe that was the point. One night during another blackout, Eli heard something new, not a voice. Music, faint guitar chords, unmistakably American, a broken recording of "Take Me Home, Country Roads," Jamie's favorite. He used to hum it during field strip drills. Used to play it through busted speakers in the Humvee like it could hold the war at bay. And now it came through like a memory wearing a uniform. The music drifted for nearly 30 seconds before the voice returned. "Pity, we're not done yet. Still cold. Still waiting." Eli pressed record. His hands trembled. "I hear you," he whispered into the mic. "Jamie, I hear you. Tell me where." But there was only static. Then a whisper, "You stop listening, don't stop now," and then it ended. The next morning, Eli requested a patrol to the new coordinates. Stokes denied it flat out, that sectors snowed in, and too high, no recon priority. "We're not wasting manpower on ghosts." Eli didn't argue, but he started preparing anyway. He checked his winter kit, charged a portable battery pack, taped extra antenna wire to the frame of his rucksack, marked trails on the back of his bunk wall with chalk. Every move quiet, careful, like a man planning not to return, but to finish something, because this wasn't about rescuing anymore. This was about bearing witness. They had called for him by name. Now, he would answer. Eli stopped marking the days. He only tracked transmissions now. The pattern was irregular, like a fever dream caught in time zones. Some nights, nothing but wind and static. Others, the voice would arrive without warning. Sometimes Jamie, sometimes others. One in particular had a deep rasp and kept repeating the same line, "No more boots, no more boots." He didn't know what it meant. A warning, a lament, a hallucination bleeding through the frequency. He logged it anyway. Everything mattered now, every breath of signal, every clipped syllable, every pause. The voices didn't beg. They weren't frantic. That's what chilled him. They spoke like men who had been left behind, not just physically, but spiritually, as if the war had forgotten them, and the world had moved on without a backward glance. They weren't crying out, they were reminding, and Eli was the last one still listening. He started hearing Jamie in his sleep. Not dreams, not quite. More like memories resurfacing through cracks. They'd first met on his second tour, before either of them knew what hell actually looked like. Jamie had been the guy who kept people laughing just long enough to keep from snapping. The guy who rigged a hot plate out of claymore parts, who quoted The Simpsons under fire, who looked at a bloodied insurgent one time and said, "He's a kid, Eli, same age as my little brother. Doesn't mean he ain't dangerous. Just means someone lied to him before we showed up." And now that voice, always calm, always clear, echoed in the white noise of the radio like a song stuck in the wires. Eli would sometimes respond softly, "Jamie, are you out there?" No answer. Until one night when the radio flared with static so sharp it made Eli wince. And then came through, low, slow, unmistakable. "You left us." His stomach turned to stone. "No," he whispered, leaning closer. I looked, not long enough." Silence again. Then a sound like wind rushing through metal or breathing through a punctured mask. He unplugged the headset, rubbed his face. There was sweat under his eyes, even in the cold. That was the first time he didn't log the transmission. Some things, he decided, were for him alone. His body began to change, thinner, tense, like the air in the comms room had grown thinner, and his lungs had to fight harder for each breath. He didn't notice how often he stood still now, just listening, not to the radio, to the space around it, as if the mountain itself was waiting for something, holding its breath. Then, 2 days later, came the second voice, this time a woman. Calm, matter-of-fact, 4 remain, 2 can walk, we're low on morphine. It sounded recent. Too clear to be a replay, too detailed to be a joke, he called it in, half expecting command to finally believe him. Instead, they laughed it off. Could be Taliban trying to bait us, he replied. They've never used American call signs, never mimicked our lost. Captain Stokes only stared at him. Eli, you sure you're okay? And just like that, the air shifted. He wasn't a soldier reporting an anomaly anymore. He was a man to be watched, a man sliding. He left without another word. That night, he played old tapes Jamie once made, squad briefings, jokes, a recording of an acoustic guitar session in the FOB back in '06. He hadn't listened to them since Jamie vanished now. They sounded like prophecy, Jamie once said in one of those tapes. Voice scratchy but smiling. If we disappear, Eli, I hope someone's still tuned in. That's all death is, right? Static where your voice used to be. Eli paused the tape. Everything in his gut told him this was real, and not just the voices, but the place, that patch of map, that thin air. He started sleeping with his boots on, kept his radio on, even when he walked to the latrine. Someone called him Comms Jesus. Behind his back, he didn't care, because the voices were changing. One night, a full name was spoken. Private Maddox, another. A soft humming, another, someone reciting Psalm 23 in a broken whisper, only making it halfway through. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow, cut. The implication sat like a brick in his chest. They were stuck in that valley, trapped between lines, not alive but not gone. Then came the convoy, a small resupply run, 2 Maraps and a Humvee. Route went close to the last known transmission Eli had logged. He asked to ride with them, denied. He told them to reroute, ignored. He stood on the outpost wall as the vehicles disappeared down the switchback trail. He knew hours later the explosion echoed up the mountainside like a scream thrown back by the wind. They called it an ambush. 5 dead, 2 missing, 1 evac with both legs gone. Eli stood in the comms room and stared at the map. They hit the same grid, the same exact grid. The voice came again that night. Slower than ever, measured, steady. They don't listen. Eli turned off the recorder. He didn't sleep. The next morning, he punched the comms wall hard enough to fracture the skin on his knuckles, blood on the metal, a sting that reminded him he was still here. And they weren't, and still he kept listening. Not for command, not for proof, but for connection. Something deep inside him had started to shift, not break, change. He realized this wasn't about bringing them back, not anymore. This was about making sure they didn't vanish, not in silence, not into myth, not into bureaucratic footnotes or grave markers back home, with nothing underneath them but dirt and maybe a few shards of bone. Jamie's voice came again just before dawn. We're still here. Don't let them rewrite it. And Eli, for the first time, didn't feel like he was losing his mind. He felt like he was finally seeing clearly. The morning after the ambush, they brought the bodies back in body bags made for 3 men, but there were 5 names. The other 2 were still somewhere in the snow, or nowhere at all. Eli didn't go to the ramp ceremony. He couldn't. He sat in the comms room alone, radio silent, staring at the cables like they might strangle him. The floor was littered with maps, printouts, scratched CDs, scraps of coordinates he couldn't shake. He hadn't shaved in a week. He wasn't sure what day it was anymore. Outside, the wind picked up. Winter in the Hindu Kush didn't arrive with warning. It just stepped into the room and stayed. His knuckles throbbed from the hit he threw the day before, swollen and purple, split open at the ridge. He hadn't even bandaged them. The pain helped. It gave weight to the things that were becoming too thin to touch, things like memory and reason, and Jamie's voice. He stared at the old field recorder on his desk. The tape inside still held the last transmission. We're still here. He hit play again. It sounded more distant now. Like the tape was aging too fast, like even machines wanted to forget. We're still here. But were they, or was it him that couldn't let go? The room felt colder than outside, the kind of cold that comes from inside the bones. He sat back, rubbed his temples. A tremor passed through him, hunger. Exhaustion or something deeper. A crack inside the self. He opened the drawer and pulled out an old photo. Jamie, back in Kandahar, grinning beside a rusted Humvee, sand in his teeth, sun in his eyes. He'd written something on the back. "One day this'll all be a story, but I hope someone tells it right." Eli stared at the words. The ink had started to fade, just like the edges of Jamie's face in the photo, like everything did eventually, unless someone held on. Late that night, the generator failed again. No one moved to fix it right away. Let it sit. Let the silence fall. Eli sat in the comms room, radio powered off, just the shadows on the wall. And the storm outside, then a voice. Not from the headset this time, but from the old analog receiver mounted on the far wall, the one they hadn't used in years. It crackled to life like a dead man breathing. "Don't stop talking, Eli, that's how we vanish!" Jamie's voice. He crossed the room like a man chasing smoke. Twisted the gain, the frequency, the filter, but the voice was gone. Static, only static. He sank to the floor, back against the wall, knees to his chest. He felt like a hole had opened inside him, not one you could fill with food or orders or even grief. This was the hole made by being the last one left listening. And still, he whispered, "I hear you, Jamie, I hear you." They sent a recovery patrol the next day. 2 squads. Stokes didn't want Eli on it, said he was emotionally compromised. He didn't fight it. He didn't want to go out there with them anyway. He wanted to go alone. When the squads returned, empty, cold, angry. One of them handed Eli a piece of torn fabric they'd found buried under a tree. An armband, Reese's, still stained with dried blood and the faded initials. Junior, that night. Eli sat in the dark and unwrapped the cloth like it was holy. Ran his fingers over the letters. Let the blood touch his own skin. Something inside him snapped, not like a scream, not like a breakdown. It was quieter, like the moment a candle gives out and no one notices. He punched the wall again. His hand split open. Bone against cinder block. He didn't stop until Reyes pulled him away. "What the hell's wrong with you?" "Mercer," Eli looked him in the eye and said, "They were trying to warn us." Reyes didn't respond. He didn't laugh either, just left him there, bleeding into the floor. The medic came the next day, talked softly, said things like, "You've been under a lot of stress, and grief does strange things to the mind." Eli didn't answer. He wasn't there to be treated. He was there to listen. That night the radio played music again, only now the melody was warped, twisted, country roads slowed to a crawl, voices layered beneath it like whispers behind a waterfall. "We're not gone, not gone, not..." "Eli, tell them we stayed. Tell them we didn't run. Remember us." And beneath it all, breathing. Not human breathing, something deeper, slower, mountain breathing. He sat there with his bloody hand wrapped in gauze, shaking. He said aloud, "I won't let them erase you." And for the first time, he felt something answer. Not in words, but in presence. A warmth in the room, a charge in the air. Like someone had just walked in, like Jamie was right there, just past the edge of sight. The next morning, Eli wrote a letter. Not to command, not to family, to whoever would come next. He wrote, "If you hear them, listen. Don't ask permission. Don't wait for orders. Just listen. The mountain remembers what the men forget." He folded the paper, slipped it into the back of the logbook, behind the page, marked with the words, "We're still here." Then he closed the book, looked out the window, snow falling now, thick, heavy, soft like ash. And in that snow, something changed. He knew what had to happen next, but he also knew it wasn't about rescue anymore. It was about witness, about being the last man standing in the cold silence of war and refusing to pretend the dead were just numbers. The storm outside howled against the walls, the heater clicked off, and the radio came to life one more time. "Come find us." For 3 nights the radio said nothing. No Jamie, no music, no scripture, no coordinates, just wind outside and silence inside, the kind that settled deep in the bones, the kind that whispered, "They've stopped calling," but Eli didn't turn it off. He kept the headset on even while he slept, even while he cleaned his bloody hand with iodine and strips of old t-shirt. He didn't flinch anymore. pain had become something quiet now, like furniture in the corner, always there, just part of the room. He kept listening and thinking, not the frantic kind of thinking that comes when you're trying to solve a problem, or convince command, or escape your own head. No, this was something slower, deeper. It came like a tide rolling back, revealing pieces of himself buried under years of routine and war-thick armor. He remembered the last real conversation he had with Jamie. It was night, 2 weeks before Jamie's squad went missing. They were on comms watch together, half a thermos of coffee between them and a busted cassette player humming in the corner. Johnny Cash, distorted and warbled, Jamie had said, "You know what scares me, Eli? Not dying, I've made peace with that. What scares me is disappearing, like we were never here, like none of this mattered." Eli had replied something flippant, something deflective. He couldn't remember the words. Only the silence afterward, the way Jamie had stared into the valley beyond the wire, as if listening to something deeper than wind. "You ever wonder if the mountain's keeping score?" Jamie said then. "Not God, not the army, just the earth, like it remembers who walked it, who bled into it." And Eli had just nodded, not understanding, but now he did. They weren't just calling for rescue. They weren't trapped behind enemy lines. They were trapped in memory. And the danger wasn't that no one could find them. It was that no one cared to look anymore. On the 4th day, something changed. Eli woke just before dawn, bathed in the pale glow of snow-reflected moonlight. He sat up in his bunk and saw it, the logbook, open, not where he left it. He didn't remember opening it in his sleep, but there it was. Flipped to the back, on the page he'd marked, "We're still here." And below that, in shaky pencil, not his handwriting, were the words, "Still listening." He stared for a long time. No fear, no surprise, just a strange kind of calm, because it didn't matter if it was real, not anymore. What mattered was that someone, or something, was trying not to be forgotten. And maybe that's what listening really was, refusing to let memory rot. That night, for the first time, he didn't record. He spoke, turned on the mic, sat up straight, cleared his throat. "This is Staff Sergeant Eli Mercer, United States Army, Combat Outpost Sabre." His voice was steady. "If anyone can hear me, I remember you." He let the silence respond. Then, "Jamie Reese, you used to quote movies under fire. You rigged a coffee maker out of a rocket battery. You saved my life in Sangin. You told me war was a fire that didn't just burn the body. It scorched the soul, I remember." He paused, then continued. "Private Maddox, you played bass in a band no one believed existed. You asked me for an extra mister, even though I knew you were hiding it for the dog near the market. You died young, but kind. I remember," he went on like that. "For 10 names, 10 ghosts." He told their stories, not their ranks, their human stories. And when he was done, he clicked the mic off and leaned back. For the first time in weeks, he closed his eyes and slept without dreaming. The next morning, he did something no one expected. He went to the captain's office and handed him the logbook, the full one. 2 months of intercepts, notes, map overlays, even the photo of Jamie. Stokes flipped through it, brow furrowed. "What exactly am I looking at, Sergeant?" Eli just said. "History." The captain looked up, waiting for some explanation. But Eli didn't offer one. He wasn't here for approval. He was here to leave something behind, a record, a witness, a voice among the static. He returned to the comms room, packed his kit, not a mission pack, not a full loadout, just winter gear, an M4 with a fresh mag, a backup radio, and the small portable recorder. No one saw him leave. He waited until the storm hit again, snow falling sideways, wind howling down the valley like a wounded animal. Then he slipped through the wire and began to climb. The trail was half mapped, half memory. He followed the grid coordinates from the earliest transmissions, the ones Jamie repeated over and over. He stopped checking GPS after the 2nd hour. Something in him knew the direction now. He moved with purpose, boots crunching snow, wind biting through seams. The radio stayed strapped to his shoulder, mic clipped near his throat, static hummed softly at 4,000 feet. The air thinned, his breath came ragged, but he didn't stop. At 4,500, the static changed. Less noise, more clarity. At 5,000 feet, just before the tree line broke, he heard it. "You're close," not Jamie, not Maddox, not any voice he'd heard before, just someone waiting. He kept walking, and in that moment, that single heartbeat of mountain wind and sky cracking open above him, Eli realized he wasn't lost. He was home. Not the kind with a door and a flag and Sunday football. The kind built out of memory, out of sorrow, out of voices too strong to fade. He reached the ridge just as the sun began to die behind the peaks. The static went silent. The world held its breath. Eli stood there, looking out at the snow-covered valley below, untouched, white, still. He raised the mic. "This is Eli Mercer," he whispered. "I hear you. I'm here." No reply, just wind, and then, faint but clear, still listening. The wind at the summit wasn't cruel. It was quiet. It moved like breath across the snow, low and steady, never in a rush. It didn't howl, it didn't scream. It simply was. Eli stood at the ridgeline where the last transmission had pulled him. Above 5,000 feet now, trees long behind him. The air too thin to speak without effort, but the radio was loud, clearer than ever. The static that had once hissed like a wound was now a steady hum. Not noise, but a signal waiting to be answered. The frequency was clean, too clean, as if this part of the mountain had cleared its throat just for him. He reached up with a frostbitten hand and adjusted the dial. No voice came, just a tone, a perfect, unbroken tone, like the sound inside your head when the world finally lets go of you. He sat on a flat rock, snow curling over the lip like fog spilling from a secret. He'd made it farther than anyone from Cop Saber, farther than any patrol since Jamie's squad vanished. His knees were shaking. Blood had dried inside his gloves from the cracked skin on his fingers. His mouth tasted like copper and old snow, but none of it mattered. He opened the logbook, read the last line again, still listening. He thought about all the years spent chasing orders and noise, and the next deployment. All the times he'd told younger soldiers, just make it home. But now he realized that was never the real goal. The real goal was not to disappear. And this was the place memory came to rest. Not in a cemetery, not in a eulogy, but here, where voices lingered in the air like breath on cold glass, where men stayed behind, not because they were abandoned, but because they refused to leave until someone heard them. He reached into his coat and pulled out the field recorder, pressed the red button, spoke softly. "This is Staff Sergeant Eli Mercer, United States Army." A pause. "I don't know what this place is. I don't know what's waiting on the other side of this signal, but I know it's real. I know you're real. I've heard you. I've heard Jamie, Maddox. I've heard too many to pretend it's all just echoes." The wind answered him with silence. "I came to find you, but now I understand. You weren't lost. You were waiting for someone to keep the story alive." He looked up at the sky, faded blue, touched with red, like bruises healing. "I'm not here to save you," he said. "I'm here to stand with you." He stopped recording, pulled the antenna from the pack, and extended it toward the ridge's edge. The signal tone peaked, a sudden swell. Strong, pure. He took off his gloves, rolled his sleeves up just enough to feel the cold dig in deep. Then he unstrapped the small solar-powered relay unit he'd brought. He anchored it into the snow with a half-frozen boot, plugged the recorder into it, set the playback to loop. The last recording, all the names, all the memories, all the voices would broadcast on repeat, a signal into nowhere, or maybe a signal home. Then he stood, took one last look at the world below. The valley stretched out like a white lung, exhaling. Nothing moved, no choppers, no voices, just snow, just sky. He didn't cry, he didn't tremble. He simply started walking, north into the white. He passed over a rise where the snow deepened, another ridge, then another. The radio on his shoulder flickered once, a blip of sound, like laughter buried in static. Jamie's voice, maybe, or just his own breath bouncing off ice and time. Then a word, soft and distant. "Closer." He nodded, spoke back, even though he wasn't sure his mic was live anymore. "I'm coming." And that was the last anyone saw of him. 3 weeks later, a drone flyover caught a brief signal coming from that part of the mountain, a steady broadcast on an unused military frequency. By the time a recon team hiked up to investigate, the snow had begun to melt. They found the recorder still playing, still looped, still telling their stories. Next to it, they found his helmet, his pack, and the logbook sealed in a waterproof bag beneath a rock cairn. No body, no sign of struggle, just footprints leading further into the peaks, vanishing where the ice thickened. The captain said he'd gone rogue. Some said it was suicide, but the new comms operator, a private from Wyoming, barely out of high school, said he still picked up strange messages on the same frequency Eli once used. Short bursts, a name, a song, a phrase in a voice that wasn't his own. Once, at 3 a.m., the private swore he heard, "Still listening," at Combat Outpost Saber. The comms room has a new coat of paint now. New soldiers, a new coffee machine that always burns the brew no matter who makes it. The cot where Eli Mercer slept is gone, replaced with a folding chair and a checklist taped to the wall. The radio's been replaced twice. The antenna, re-anchored after the last windstorm, snapped it in half. But every now and then, late at night, when the generator stutters and the snow falls heavy, the radio wakes up just for a moment. Not loud, not clear, just a flicker of signal, a tone, and sometimes a name. The young comms guy, Private Nick Dawson, says he hears it once a week. More when it storms. No one believes him. But he believes Eli existed. He read the logbook, the one they found buried in the rocks above the tree line. Beside that old solar relay, he said the handwriting changes halfway through, starts out sharp and clean, then drifts into something slower, almost like it's being written from memory instead of fact. And on the final page, there's no ink, just 4 fingerprints, dirt and blood, and the words, "Some ghosts don't haunt places, they haunt hearts." There was never an official investigation into Eli's disappearance. No press release, no silver star, no folded flag sent home. Because how do you write paperwork on a man who walked into a mountain to listen to the dead? You don't. You just try to forget. But memory doesn't obey orders. 2 winters later, a recon team was sent north to monitor new Taliban movement near the border. They camped near the same ridge Eli vanished from. The lieutenant in charge, a quiet man who didn't believe in much, reported something strange in his journal. It wasn't an attack. It wasn't an ambush. It was a sound. He wrote, "Around 3:30, the wind dropped, snow all around. We heard a radio crackle to life. My comms guy wasn't touching it, just sitting there. And a voice came through, calm, clear, no distortion. It said, Echo 6 Lima Broadcasting." Then silence. Static again. Nothing more, they thought. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe one of the new guys playing games. Maybe just mountain interference. But the frequency they recorded, 34,525 megahertz, Reese's old channel, the one Eli swore never went quiet. Years pass. Wars move on. The mountain stays. The wind still carries sound strangely up there. Sometimes soft, sometimes sharp, like it's trying to translate something the earth remembers and men forget. And sometimes, if you're up there alone, really alone, with the snow thick and the air thin and your heart cracked open just enough to hear, you might catch it. Not a full sentence, not a name, just a feeling. Like someone is still out there, still listening. And maybe that's the point. Maybe Eli didn't walk off into nothing. Maybe he became something else. Not a ghost, not a myth, but a frequency. A reminder that in war, some things are never truly lost, only unheard, until someone tunes in. Some stories deserve more than silence. If this one stayed with you, even just a little, let it echo. Leave a comment below, share a memory, a name, a voice that shouldn't be forgotten. And if you believe these stories matter, hit the like button, subscribe, share it with someone who still remembers, because war leaves many scars, but the worst are the ones that disappear without a trace. Here we listen, here we remember you're not alone. This is Echoes of War.